Today we're going to find out how David Wainwright built his honey farm. Hello, welcome to Gwynedd Griffith. Here we look at everything beekeeping, farming, countryside living, and we do reviews as well. Now I'm in David's, one of David's offices here, and we're going to find out how David started beekeeping and how he ended up in this massive honey factory here in Aberystwyth. The story is very fascinating. Hope you enjoy it. So I'm in, I suppose, is this one of your offices or a bit of a meeting room area?
Yeah.
You come in and talk, and we've got the bark hives or the straw hives. This is, I suppose, the start of how the African honey line started. But I know your story, but I'm sure everybody on YouTube would love to know how you started, how you got into bees, how you ended up in Africa. Give us, paint us a little picture of how a young David with two hives or a hive started off to build the business we're seeing today.
Okay, well, it started when I was about 18 or so, and I got a couple of hives, and I was lucky enough to meet another bee farmer. There's not many bee farmers in Britain, and luckily one of the first beekeepers I met was a bee farmer, and this chap, his name was Alan Barclay, down in Sussex, and he had his own little bee business, and I just wanted to follow in his footsteps, really. So I had my two hives. I needed more hives, so I needed to get some money. And a friend of mine told me, well, if you want to earn money, the best place to go is up in the Shetland Isles. Work in a fish factory up there in the winter, because they pay well and they're always looking for people. So I got on my bicycle, didn't have a car in those days, cycled up to Aberdeen, got on a ferry, went to this place which was they called it the gut factory. It was where they converted fish guts from the fish factories into fish meal. It was an extremely smelly place, but they always needed people to help. So I got a job, and they had a caravan in the yard of this fish factory where we all stayed, and I worked there for a few months over the winter. Very smelly place. Very hard work, very cold, but I earned some cash, and then I came back and bought myself a little Morris Minor van, and had a bit of money to go and buy some beehives. And I managed to find, I sort of found out where in old farm sheds there was stacks of hives, left over from the old bee farmers, like Manley and Gale and people. And I bought up a few sort of lots of these various odds and ends of hives, and I slowly sort of got those going, got them filled with bees, started producing some honey. Used to jar up my honey and drive around in my little Morris Minor van trying to find customers. And it went on for a while, and I decided, well, the best thing to do was to go up to London, because there's more customers, more shops in London. So I wandered around the streets of London trying to sell my honey. But luckily enough, I had a stroke of luck, because one of the places I went to was Neal's Yard, and they said, oh, we're looking for a beekeeper to supply us with honey, and what we'll do is we'll supply you with jars, you fill those jars, and then every month come up here and sell us the honey. So that's what I started doing. And of course this one customer replaced all these other small little customers, and all of my honey was just going into these big jars. They were big 2-pound jars, and I just used to fill up all these 2-pound jars and go to this one place every month instead of driving around the streets of London trying to find all sorts of little shops. So that worked out very nicely, and that's kind of been my business model ever since. You know, I prefer to have a few big customers rather than loads and loads of little customers. So that was the start of it. But you know, it took years to build this business up to the level where I could actually make a living out of it. And it was, you know, I had to do everything myself. I had to sort of repair all these hives, make various bits of equipment, repair the van, do this, do that, do everything. Gradually build it up to, at the time I had about 200 hives, and I could actually earn a bit of money out of it, and carried on like that. And then that's when I saw this advert for a beekeeper wanted in Zambia, and I decided, well, I would love to do that. So I found a local beekeeper who could look after my hives, and off I went to Zambia. And then that was how I started the connection with Zambia. And I got there, and that was so fascinating. You know, the guys were keeping their bees in hives like this, and they're just putting these hives out in the forest far off from the village. They had a little camp where they stayed out in the forest, and they'd go off and hunt for some animals. So we'd go and stay there, and we'd just be eating this amazing bush meat that was shot the night before, and they had a calabash where they brewed a honey beer. So in the evenings we'd sit around drinking honey beer, and in the days go and crop honey from the hives. And a very surprising thing is that these beekeepers don't wear any protective clothing. They just have a way with the bees, a very gentle way of handling the bees, and they manage to do that without agitating the bees, so they can crop their honey without hardly getting stung at all. And you just can't imagine how you could possibly do that with those African bees. You know, when I tried it, well, I had full protective clothing on, and still I got very severely stung, because the way I handle bees just agitated the bees, and they all poured out of the hive and attacked me by the thousands. But the local people had some kind of Zen-like skill with the bees, and the bees wouldn't get alerted and would just allow them to crop the honey. And I was going there, and I was supposed to be training these beekeepers in modern beekeeping. But when I saw what they were doing and the kind of skill and experience they had, and they'd been doing this for generations and generations, I really couldn't see what relevance our type of beekeeping had, because our hives are so expensive in comparison. You need so much equipment, which you've got to buy. You can't just make it yourself if you live in a little village in the middle of nowhere. I just couldn't see how, you know, how they were going to make a profit out of it. Basically, they're going to have to invest so much, and even if they did produce more, it wouldn't cover the costs of investment. They seemed loads better off with the hives that they had. And when I talked to the beekeepers, they agreed. You know, they said, no, we're not interested in any other type of hives. We can produce honey in volumes, beeswax in volumes. What we need is a market. So what we then started to do was to go around the villages and buy the honey and buy the beeswax. And we used to travel hundreds of miles across northwest province of Zambia. It's a huge area, it's about a quarter the size of the UK, and we'd be chugging along in our little Land Rovers or army trucks, going to all these remote places and buying the honey. And the welcome we got was amazing, because a lot of these people, you know, they could produce, but no one was coming to buy. So when you came there and you were buying their product, they had cash in their hands for the first time for years maybe. They were so happy. And we used to bring goods for sale, like what they called essential commodities, things like salt, loads and loads of salt, soap, cooking pots, blankets, and these were just the essentials of life. And you come to a village and they'd be so excited about salt, and they'd say, no, we haven't had salt here for several years. So you imagine if you've been eating your food without salt for several years, you're very keen to get some salt. They were so happy. And that has carried on. You know, now we're still dealing with, you know, the same honey from the same villages. You know, probably those people have passed on, but we're now dealing with their children and their grandchildren, and they organise everything down in Zambia. We don't have anything to do with that. We just buy the honey when it arrives in the UK port, and they're producing more than ever they've done before. Every year they produce more honey, and you know, all those communities are supported by that honey. The young men don't have to go off to the towns to look for work anymore. They can produce a good income in their villages by producing honey, and they've got a ready market for it. So yeah, things are, the economy of those villages in northwestern Zambia is much better than what it used to be, and that's all thanks to honey and beeswax.
Wow, quite fascinating. And to think, you know, things in life happens for a reason. You know, you developed your honey farm, you went up to around 200 hives, and then had the opportunity to go out to Africa, and you saw the honey out there, and to bring that back in here and to tie the two of them together and to build what you've got here is quite something. Because that was quite a big move, really, because your own honey farm was taken off, and then to jump ship and go to Africa and do all that at the same time, and then come back and tie everything back together. I mean, what you've done is huge, really. Now, from my point of view, now you've come back from Africa, you've back into your own honey farm now, so you've got your African honey coming in, and you're developing a market for that, and you're producing honey and you're developing a market for that. When was the next stage of growth, really? Because I'm guessing at the time it was still just you. When did you decide we need to get some help, and you know, get that next stage growth of the business? When was the next big step?
When we started the Zambian import business, so we set up a company, Tropical Forest Products, to import that honey. And initially we used contractors to pack the honey. So life was very simple in those days. You know, I could just work from a little office in a spare bedroom and coordinate everything from there, because other people pack the honey. We just needed to send out invoices and collect the money off the customers, and the honey packers organised the rest. So that was all very simple. But after a few years of that, I began to be dissatisfied with the quality of the honey that these guys were packing, and I tried several different packers, but I could never really get it right. And in the end I decided the only way to get it right is we've just got to do the whole thing ourselves. So that's when we moved to this place, and we set up a honey factory with the idea that the shipping containers are going to come here, we're going to unload the honey, we're going to warm it, we're going to pack it, we're going to deliver it to the customers, and we're going to be in charge of everything, and then we can make sure the quality of the honey is as perfect as it can be. And then of course we needed more staff to run this place, but originally there was just 3 of us, and I used to do the office work. It didn't seem to take very long in those days, and I'd do office work for about an hour, and then we'd be packing honey all day and prep for the next day, and we just used to go on like that with the 3 of us, And then gradually, you know, it grew bit by bit up to where we are now.
Quite fascinating. And, you know, I love these kinds of stories because, you know, I've grown a honey farm from 2 hives up until where we are now. And how did you get? Because you were in Aberystwyth, and the honey, was the honey farm UK wide already by then, so it was no big deal getting bees in other areas, or was there a bigger plan once you had this place set up that, right, we're gonna go to these different areas and produce honey in different areas?
No, it wasn't a plan like that. So, you know, to start off with, the plan was that the honey packing business is going to be the main thing, and the beekeeping is going to be a sideline. So I reduced the number of hives down to about 50, and I just operated 2 or 3 apiaries, and it was a sort of sideline. And the aim was to sell in local stores, you know, just village shops around here. And there was a sort of a breakthrough, lucky chance. And when I look back on these, you know, development, it's not so much there was a plan, it's just been a series of lucky chances. So what happened with this one was that we went and did a trade show in Birmingham, which went on all week, and we packed a whole van load of honey, and we went to this show, and the plan was we were going to sell all of this honey over the course of this show. It was a BBC Good Food show, and it was a right disaster. Actually, we sold about 6 jars of honey. All the honey we unpacked from the van, we had to pack back in again at the end of it. It cost us loads of money to be there, loads of money to stay in hotels and everything. It all seemed to be a total disaster. But when I got back, there was a message from the Kate Weston, who was the managing director of Fortnum and Mason. And one of the 6 jars had actually been sold to her, though she didn't identify herself at the time. And she left a message, and she said she was looking for someone to pack British honey for them. Would we be interested? So I said, yes, we can definitely do that. Or we had absolutely no proper way of doing that at the time. But anyway, I just said yes and thought, well, we'd work something out. And so we started supplying Fortnum and Mason with honey. And then, of course, you know, they needed lots of honey we had lots of different products that we developed. And we needed more honey to feed all those products. So that's why we got more hives in order to feed the products going into Fortnum and Mason. And we wanted to have honey from all around the country. We had a very good range of honeys that we produced for them, you know, everything from honey from just by Land's End in Cornwall up to Scottish heather honey, bell heather honey, sea lavender honey from Norfolk, all sorts of different honeys. So that meant that we could put hives in different places and produce some of these honeys ourselves. So that's why we started doing that and expanded the number of hives, produced more honey. And then later on we got the contract with Marks and Spencer's for a bit of a similar sort of thing, but on the Marks and Spencer's level, which was much bigger. So we expanded the hives more and more, and up to the level where we are now. But we always expanded them. We'd always had a market, and then we expanded the hives to feed the market.
And I suppose that's one thing you've done right. You haven't gone and spend a load of money and then look for customers. You lined up the customers, and then you expanded in line of that. So you spend the money, produce a crop, and then you get your money back.
Yeah.
So it's just been, I suppose, years of working very hard, compounding different customers, getting a few customers, selling honey to them really well, keeping them happy, getting a few more, and before you know it, here you are with a big honey factory, 1,500 hives around the UK, 20 staff working, and you know, all from beekeeping, which is quite fascinating, really, David. And you know, you're still young enough to keep going for many more years, you know.
That's the plan.
And you know, I don't think you're gonna slow down. You know, I'm pretty sure you're just as hungry now as what you were 30-40 years ago. You know, if some of the big shop phones you up now, I'm pretty sure you go, well, we'll put 500 more hives somewhere, and we'll do any for them as well. So I mean, absolutely fascinating. A real, you know, inspirational, motivational story, and hopefully it's inspired you guys at home, and that you've found out the story of how Wainwrights Bee Farm came about, and how they've reached the high level and the high standard of where they are now. Thanks for watching the video. See you again soon.